All right, everybody, welcome along to this week's episode of the Nouveau podcast. As always, it's your host, Thomas Pierce. My guest this week is Michael King Jr. Michael is a licensed mental health therapist, inspirational speaker, and author. He specializes in working with men to win against anger and anxiety, and through therapy, he strategizes with his clients to create a winning recovery action plan. Provides solutions focused on CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, mindfulness-based stress reduction for anxiety, depression, and PTSD. And why this is also a really timely and very relevant conversation is that Michael's motto is men need self-care too. So he has acknowledged the um, skills gap between how men and women can identify and process strong emotions. And he also has a book focused on it. So The Tribe of Men is Michael's new book that helps men understand how to evolve their masculinity and reach their potential. So, with all that, Michael, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the Nouveau podcast.
Hey, Thomas, thank you for the opportunity to speak to the podcast and be a part of this great show.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely, man. It's kind of rare that I find someone who is so well aligned, I would say, with the mission and what we're doing. Um, so I just wanted to learn to start off a little bit about the work you do, and what's your why for being in this space, and also how did you come to have this um, specialty in working with men and masculinity?
Well, thank you. So I've been in mental health for 20 years, but my why initially started when wanting to fathers and sons to have healthy relationships. And I had a good I had a tense to really good, great, loving relationship with my dad. Along the ways, especially in the teenage years, we got a little tense. But as I was a young adult and started going on with my life and marriage and family, he and I have got a lot closer. And so, but before he passed, I'm glad we were able to make some amends because there was some tension there. So being able to have to help fathers and sons have strong relationships, that's kind of the why I got to the mental health space, working in mental health and social work in various aspects, from community clinics to psychiatric schools, where I worked with a lot of families, done some family therapy and some individual counseling. And that pretty much was helping, again, dads and sons have solid relationships. And I've gotten to the space of working with men that actually is over the last year. 'Cause even though I was in mental health for a while, I didn't really have that niche of working with men. And that came from just going through life experience, experiencing a divorce, co-parenting two kids, a 17-year-old and a 13-year-old, and having a civil relationship, a good relationship with my ex-wife. And we are able to, even though we were divorced, we were not divided. So the family just restructured. And maturing as a man was a big part of that. When the family restructures and goes through a divorce or separation, it can be a tremendous impact on the individuals and the kids. So based on the journey of going through that process, some lessons I learned about myself, after a while, I wanted to really focus in on working with men, anger management, anxiety, depression, breakup recovery, healthy masculinity, helping them unlearn some of the things that they may have learned, and trying to find ways that, not only through self-care, but having a great support system that the man can work on their personal development. Because I think, like, there are a lot of great men out here that want to protect and provide for their families, right? But sometimes they put their personal development and personal growth to the side. And I think that if there can be a balance of all that, then personal growth and development, then a man can continue to protect and provide for their family, or even protect and provide for themselves, right? Because if they're not in relationship, but they still have goals or personal growth and development, and that's important too. So not just guys in relationships and guys in families, but for guys in general to kind of find out their own why and find their purpose along this journey of life.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that, and I'm sorry that you lost your father. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's an interesting thing, and it always comes back to, not always, but almost all of the men I speak with, and I'm not a father, so I don't know this, but especially the guys who are dads, it does come back to this providing. Obligation is maybe not quite the right word, because obligation implies some kind of coercion, but just a need or a desire to give the family the best life possible. And structurally, how do you think that, or what do you think about that pressure, or that internal sense of responsibility that men feel? Because, even in your situation, for example, you're not married to your ex-wife anymore, but I'm sure you both are, hopefully, as long as she's healthy and all good, also is employed and working. So it's not like it's all on you financially, for example. But a lot of men do feel like it is all on them. So why do you think that is? And is that a productive paradigm to look at the life through?
Well, yeah, I think that it's because of traditional roles, right? And we still have some of those in place where like guys are like, supposed to be the breadwinners, right? And some of that is healthy, but a lot of it isn't, because there should be shared responsibilities. Particularly, it depends on where you are living as well, right? The economics of the area that you live do play in a factor, and having a two income household, can be very beneficial with getting like basic needs met, like food, shelter, clothing, activities. But I think a lot of those traditional roles have been just passed down to us for eons, right? And guys feel the pressure to um, provide, and sometimes to their detriment, right? So they guys are working long hours. Um, Guys are trying different opportunities and projects, and then putting those either financial gains or um, actually, yeah, putting out financial gains or even professional growth and development over their care, right? So guys are sometimes burning themselves out trying to, burn the candle on both ends, trying to get ahead, whether to pursue goals, achieve goals, but maybe not so necessarily finding a balance. I think innately, just it's within us to want to be able to work and be productive, and to have people that we're responsible for. And so I think just traditionally those roles have been placed upon us. But I think that over the course of time, things are evolving, but that's still innate responsibility to provide and protect. I mean, I think that's in our DNA as guys.
For sure. And how does that work with, in your own experience, say, of being a parent? How does that work interacting with the mother's innate instincts? And is that a situation where, I imagine that was a learning situation too, because no one knows what to expect with having a kid, right? So it's like, before you know it, the kids are here, and then I have all these new feelings coming up, and then my partner also has all these new feelings coming up, and we have to navigate that. I imagine that's kind of complicated.
Yeah, I mean, it can be. They are. Most people don't do a deep dive into the books to prepare what parenting is and what the roles will be. People just a lot of people live by the experience, and you live and learn and grow. I mean, you can hear someone share their experience with you about their experience in parenting, but to go through it for yourself, with a partner, is truly unique, right? So it's important to have a support system in place so that you can tap into someone's knowledge and expertise, or just to even vent to when you have questions or when it gets frustrating. But it's definitely important that communication is a key to overcoming a lot of different challenges or learning. So being able to communicate with your partner even prior to family planning, even to being communicating on what the needs are, what does a partnership look like in terms of developing a household, managing a household together, and before you even bring kids involved, definitely having a good communication about what budgeting, about planning, problem solving, um, about what life will look like when, as the kids and responsibilities kind of grow, trying to have as best as you can have these conversations ahead of time versus by like kind of going by the seat of your pants and kind of just the we'll see kind of method, you know. Yeah.
Totally, totally. And the legacy of that, or the kind of the impulse to be the provider, also gets us into the territory of this man box conditioning we have. And that's a term that you used in our pre-recording call that kind of stuck out to me. So, what is the man box in your definition?
Well, in my definition, the man box is that society stereotypical place view of men protect and provide, keep your emotions inside. If you have a problem, you just kind of keep pushing through it, keep your head down and keep grinding. Don't show any signs of weakness. Anything that's like feminine is bad, right? And so, which includes talking about emotions or expressing yourself or your true feelings is like looked at as weird or bizarre. Um, Trying to fit in order to get along with other guys, right? So the man box has a tendency to, it can kind of necessarily stifle growth. I think from my experiences learning over the course of my years, you know, I'm just 47, I'll be 48 this year. So I've just been on this earth a few years, but understanding that some of the, some of the tools that I was taught wasn't necessarily serving me as I learned over the course of time, especially in developing relationships, learning that actually the number one relationship is the relationship with yourself. So you know, the man box is sometimes trying to get that, looking for a trophy wife to try to impress the guys, right? Doing these macho heavy things in order to impress guys or to be um, sometimes verbally aggressive, sometimes that aggression that just kind of comes out as a form of leadership, which is not always actually healthy. You know, having like a type A, but being really rigid and
Mm,
not accepting of anything that's outside of what that person would expect a man to be.
totally. You know what? Something that struck me is that, at least among, straight men, there's this all kinds of homophobic tendencies, right?
Right.
And but then, as you just mentioned, so much of the status chasing is actually to impress other men, which is pretty ironic. you know,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's like
Yeah.
you put queer people, not you obviously, but the culture kind of puts queer people as less than, but also we want to have the nicer house, the nicer car, the nicer whatever. It's kind of ironic.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, being able to evolve, like I'm not see a guy. To me, evolution is being accepting of people. Is that things accepting that things change, right? While still respecting the fact that there are people that just still traditional roles and values fill, and so and being able to not demean, downplay, or hate, or demonstrate any type of discrimination against someone who may not look like you, or it doesn't demonstrate masculine behaviors like someone who's more rigid may think they are, but being accepting of the whole range of masculinity and not just kind of pigeonholing um, men and just a tough guy, aggressive, heavy muscles, you know, emotionally limited, but you know, just kind of really allowing ourselves to be free from that and being accepting of others, right, and allowing ourselves to learn and grow and what's the word I'm looking for? Well, yeah, just to really learn and grow and to be oh my goodness. Well, just saying more open and
Hmm.
honest and about how our culture is evolving, while we can respect others. So it's just it's mainly about evolution and respect. And that's, I think that breaking out of the man box can be a lot of good to help us men evolve, and understanding that our potential is beyond their traditional roles, and views are evolving, and there's strength behind that. Like, there's strength behind it being expressive, right? There's strength behind being vulnerable, right? So in some ways, in the man box, people aren't vulnerable or transparent or even true to themselves sometimes. But when you're vulnerable, in terms of finding a safe space that you can have an outlet to someone, that you can, so a guy can talk about some of his insecurities or challenges, maybe providing for himself or providing for others, and some of how those maybe the disappointments in the past, or maybe the anxieties about the uncertainties of the future, are impacting him in the space today. If a guy is willing to address some of those challenges that he's having internally, that's that's strength. That's not really a sign of weakness. Someone accepting, like, you know what, I get it. I have a problem, and you know what, I'm gonna need some help to solve through this, to solve through to solve the problem. To me, that's an example of strength.
I agree. And one of the man box examples I can think of, and a nice parallel or analogy to understand it, is when we talk about bullying, for example. Like, bullying is understood by most people. I think it's kind of common knowledge that if someone's a bully, it means they don't have a lot of self love. You know, if they can't accept other people, or they put others down, then there's a lack of self love there. And I think the same thing can be said of how men are conditioned, because by judging others, it's indicative of something missing inside, right? Some element of self acceptance isn't there. And I think it's because with the whole man box we're put in, it's discouraged to be fully human and feel, because the things we're describing, to me, I think that being vulnerable, being expressive, being honest, being able to say I'm sorry, being able to ask for help, these things are all squarely in the spectrum of being human. And if we're telling individuals to not go there, then we're denying them their humanity in some sense. So it makes sense that then intra men, there's kind of this constant feedback loop of putting each other down, because unless someone has been encouraged to love themselves, they're not going to be able to offer that acceptance to other people. So that's kind of what I was thinking about, kind of analogous to a bully situation.
Yeah, definitely. Now, 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 there is some aspects too, like we had mentioned, like putting each other down. Like now in the black community, we have this there's this game called playing the dozens, which is kind of, like I say, ragging on each other at times, right? And in a jokingly, supposed to be lighthearted way, but I think sometimes that those things can are necessary, right? Because we need to have healthy social networks and social outlets to be able to, as men, to be able to again, feel those human connections, right? But when those outlets start to become unhealthy, whether the playing the dozens or the ragging starts to impact someone's sense of self or self esteem, or somebody kind of keeps digging maybe to project some, um, because they want to maybe displace some anger that they're experiencing, but they want to kind of target. So when it starts to demean, or starts to become, like, really insensitive, then it can be really problematic in terms of, guys socializing and ragging on each other and stuff. But um, definitely needs to be a healthy level of support system that guys need to have. We need to have social outlets with each other in order to help us continue to grow, learn about each other's backgrounds, in order to try to move through, especially some of the challenges that we currently face in society right now. With whether it's equality rights or social justice, um, activism that needs to be done to take place to kind of bring a healing to amongst the races in our nation, in the different communities. And I think that that's important too. So that see that we have a lot of human commonalities, and that if we can continue to work on developing those bonds, then we can try to decrease hate and hopefully end racism. And I think men play a great role in that by getting to know each other, like forums like we are here. You and
Hmm.
I meeting here through this forum, and being able to have like real discussions about how we can continue to evolve as men, which will hopefully have a great impact on our culture overall.
I agree completely. And I think the identity lens is really interesting too, because, oftentimes when I talk about my experiences of masculinity, right, it's largely going to be among other white people. Not always, but generally thinking about like my earliest social bonds, right, it's with white people. And so then also, as you identified, both within races, within communities, and then between races and communities, that's a whole nother layer of what everyone's bringing to the table. It's just a very important thing to keep in mind. Um, and yeah, I agree, man. I think that we do have a strong role to play in ending racism and discrimination as men, because kind of the way I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this, because the way I kind of see it is that at this point, not everyone, but these power structures that we've identified still exist to some extent. You know, as far as patriarchal households, men having more seats at the figurative and literal tables. So if men can lead by example and have dialogues that do kind of end discrimination, or kind of at least build bridges, it's very impactful. Um, and it's funny because I feel like one of the ways that discrimination and racism is perpetuated is that it's not encouraged to try to actively do that. There's I don't know, there's no one out there saying, hey, like, go build a community with your neighbor of a different race. That's not like, it's not like encouraged, which to me is kind of interesting, because it seems like that would be a good way to make safe as spaces safer, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah, getting to know like people from different ethnic groups, getting to know each other is very powerful. I have a story that like will always stick with me. When I was in the Boy Scouts many years ago, actually I'm an Eagle Scout, and but before I became Eagle Scout, this was probably like in '88 or '87. We were in summer camp, and the troop that I belonged to was an all black troop. Like, and back when I grew up in my area, like really, I didn't really get a chance to get out of the community as much. So I thought America was mostly black, but
Hmm.
I didn't. When I was in scouting, it helped me see. We traveled around. We went to different summer camps. We traveled to different jamborees and functions, and I was like, okay, I see that America is a more diverse place. And then one year, one summer camp, um, we were away at this camp called Goshen. Right, it was a popular scouting camp, and we were assigned a camp leader, right? Which was a young white guy. He was a scout, right? So he was an older scout, and he was assigned to us. And it was, he was actually great. He hung out with us a lot. We had a really really great troop. We would win awards for being. They would have awards for the cleanest camp, and they would have other awards for like they would have skills awards, and then they would have like swimming awards and different like sports type things as well. But they had a lot of like knot tying awards, and we did really well that week. And I know towards the end of that week, the guy, I'll never forget this, but the young man, I forgot his name, but I won't forget the experience, because he stood up in front of our troop and he said, after seeing you guys 1 week and being with you guys, he realized that his mom and dad was teaching him the wrong things, because his mom and dad prior to them was teaching him that black people were lazy, that they was all these stereotypical things that you hear that was kind of fostering hate and bigotry. And he stood up. I'll never forget. He stood up. He had tears in his eyes, and he cried. And he realized his mom and dad was raising him to hate black people, and that
Wow.
everything that he taught, they were telling him was wrong. just in that 1 week, we showed him that, that was wrong. So I thought that was very powerful. So like when you get to know, especially white people, they get to know more people of color, that can really help start to build some bridges. Because as much as they may think, even though slavery has been over since, well, technically on paper, to kind of over, well, since 1863, right? That's what the history books say. But we still feel a lot of residual effects of slavery to this day. And it would probably be like, I thought during my generation, I was like thinking that, okay, yeah, we're getting ahead. Not getting ahead. We're just trying to close the gap. But if you think about it, 400 plus years of slavery, been out of slavery since 1863, kind of technically. But then on this day of Juneteenth, it was still like slaves were free, but it wasn't until 2 years later that they found out that they were actually free. And so I said all that to say that there are a lot of things still in place in the form of institutional racism that kind of still impact us today in terms of creating the divide and kind of fueling some of the hate, whether it's the hate crimes that like the shooter in Buffalo did earlier this year, or over the course of the years of hate crimes that's been committed. It's I think platforms like this and having a conversation like this and more conversations like if about maybe diversity committees in corporations, and then people talking to their kids about how we can bridge the racial divide in this country is needed. Um, yeah, I think I kind of went off on a tangent a little bit, but I think that guys do play a major role in trying to bridge this gap.
Totally. And well said. Thank you. And yeah, absolutely. I mean, it is Juneteenth observed today, so certainly an important and relevant topic. And yeah, I agree, man. And one thing I've noticed in my own kind of self education is that white people will use this coded language to convey race without identifying it. It's like one thing will be like not acknowledging race is a part of it, because like if I'm with a group of white people and we're all buddies, like no one's like, hey, isn't it kind of weird we're all white? No one's saying that, and that is part of the perpetuation, I believe. And then also, among like white people will use this like oh like I met someone and they were saying, oh, my one of my kids was working for in a job in the city, and you can imagine how that was. And I was like, no, actually I can't. Like, can you elaborate? Like, what do you mean? Like what are you saying right now? you know and that's part of it too, is like implying that, like, oh, it was the city, implying it was more chaotic, implying there were less white people or more black people, for example. Like that's kind of where my mind went. And it's like calling out those things of being like, so no, I don't know what you mean. What are you saying? You know, as an example of kind of how these things are perpetuated, and these myths about race, and on the
Yeah,
yeah, on
is
the
a
legacy
lot
of
of stereotypical beliefs. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
super.
Oh,
No,
I,
yeah, go ahead.
I mean, clash there with you, but yeah,
Mhm.
a little. So like the stereotypical beliefs, right? Because I think that even on I think that, yeah, well, white people need to challenge their own stereotypical beliefs, right? And
Mhm.
then and we all kind of can as well. But if they take the lead on changing some of the beliefs, because your behaviors and the actions start with the thoughts. So challenging
Mm.
how they identifying your own deeply embedded, like they call it implicit biases, right?
Mhm.
Because right, they may not it may not be to the surface, right? Maybe kind of still kind of subconscious, some of these um stereotypical beliefs. But when they do, kind of come up, whether they manifest in you or they manifest in a conversation in a group, being able to tend to speak up about it in a way that brings a unique conversation to the table, and I get it can be challenging, especially if you're in a group of friends, your white friends, and maybe not everybody might not be on the same page with that, but to be able to challenge that is a powerful. It can be empowering. It can help bridge the gap, and it's a lot of work that we still need to do. Definitely, it's a lot of work
Totally.
a lot of hard work too, a lot of hard work because it seems like some of the hate is still that hate that existed back in the Willie Lynch slave times. It's still kind of there, you know, and it lives in order for us to. I thought in my lifetime it'd be, but I think even I don't even think in my kids' lifetime or even my grandkids' lifetime. I think this is going to be
Mm,
it's going to be something that we would continue to need to address, in different forms and ways.
agreed. And I think it does kind of tie into the skills we're trying to build because from a white person's perspective, it requires acknowledging, oh yeah, like I was brought up in this culture that creates an other. I was in this space where either explicitly or implicitly I was taught and conditioned that other people are different. And maybe I was getting one message at home, which is that we respect everyone, and a more positive message, but maybe at school or in the town or wherever the heck we're getting a different message. So that is kind of what's part of, I think, stalling the progress is that progress requires self reflection and realizing, hey, I have a role to play in this, or I have things to change about myself. Um, and then, yeah, on the legacy of slavery, I think that's a really interesting topic that also is very nuanced that doesn't get enough play because the thing that made it stick out to me was, or hit home for me, was that, okay, my parents were born in the 60s. That means that within 100 years of their birth, 100 years previously, slavery existed in this country. When they were born, there were people alive who lived and experienced slavery. So to me, that direct link kind of makes it so much more real. It's like this is not like some far away, like this is pretty relatively recently and shorter of a distance from that institution being alive in this country. That's less time than the whole country's been around. It's like we haven't even hit the equal point yet in the timeline.
No, right, right.
So this whole idea of like we shouldn't talk about it or we can't talk about solutions is baloney.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, and I think so let me just say this though, as we go in a little bit, because I do know that I just wanted to say this, like not all white people are the enemy,
Hmm.
right? And I
Hmm.
know that like not all black people are a friend. We have the same in our community, so
Hmm.
you got to kind of judge people by their heart and character,
Hmm.
right? And and to think, but we've been slavery technically on paper ended 1863 and this is 2022. So I mean, it's like maybe what 100. My math, 119 years, kind of like or something like that. My math is a little bit off. That's why I'm in mental health, not math. But yeah, the numbers don't add up. So, um, and I guess this thing I would say, it's good that we need to have more conversations like this because I know personally, like when we hear now, I understand the hearing some other historical events in the country. They're like never forget certain other days. So,
Interesting.
but then a major piece of the content, it's like, well, kind of forget that. It's
Forget about
okay.
that.
It's like and it's not about shaming. I'm trying to say that because I think
That's a
that's
good.
the thing too. It's not about shame. It's not about hate but it's just about an acknowledgement so then we can truly like move forward like because if you like never forget one thing like never ever forget and that happened 10, 20 years ago but the thing that impact and still leaves a lasting legacy on a country you're like well yeah you're free kind of get over it. That's kind of how it feels sometimes like from our end through our lens like you got some advancements. It was, but the thing is, do we really? We still kind of really battling the same for civil liberties and civil justice and like, technically, like voting rights aren't guaranteed. They have to be voted on every like I forget every decade or so. They just did a vote so we can keep voting rights, right? So there are some things that they're like some of the systems that are in play that are still, make
Totally.
race such a polarizing topic in our country.
Absolutely, man. I mean, like, you can't have a um, felony conviction and vote. Okay, so until very recently, marijuana possession and possession of crack or cocaine was a federal or a more serious crime. Um,
Yeah,
at which point you cannot vote. Okay, who was affected by the war on drugs? Not mostly white people, you know. So that's
yeah.
a very direct recent link, and these things are really, it's a web of them. So I
Mhm.
guess from a solutions perspective, people talk about reparations, people talk about a lot of different solutions. From where you sit, whether it be policy or just more interpersonal level, what's a
Uh,
kind of concrete step you think that if more individuals were taking, we could kind of promote some healing?
well, then you definitely getting to know more people of color, right? Um, is a great step, and it can be in the form of mentorship, right? I must say, a lot of my opportunities that I got, especially like going to college, for me, it was a white man. Matter of fact, Coach Roger Ericker gave me an opportunity to um, to attend Towson University, back in the days, and so I think that in the organizations, in the corporate world organizations, that I think that companies need to have a diversity committee. Right? I think that in major universities there needs to be diversity and inclusion committees, or a liaison that's in charge of equity and inclusion. I think kids talking to their kids about race, but from the aspect of contributions. Like, again, I don't think it's something to shame. We're not looking to shame people, for the history of this country. I mean, no one can change the history, but in order to help have open discussions, to be accountable, and not act like we're trying to forget the history, that part
Mm.
of history, I think that would mean a lot to helping mend, mend the bonds. I think that when there's hate crimes, definitely, I think the hate crime laws help. I definitely think that, that's a whole nother piece in terms of policing of communities, but having those hate crimes and laws to be able to protect people in place to try to diminish anybody shooting somebody just or killing someone just because of the color of their skin. Those are just a couple ways, but definitely trying to, mentors, getting to know people of color, including diversity in the workplace, diversity in committees into the schools, and among the leadership, and then, but specifically if people can challenge their own stereotypical beliefs. I think that's a big start, starting with the heart. So you do some heart surgery in order to, so we can start to move, as a collective, and making progress towards eliminating racism.
Well said, man. And I think this is a good learning lesson too, with the new holiday, Juneteenth observed today. So, what does that holiday mean for you? Because I think it's good to Memorial Day was recently, to understand what is Memorial Day about. So, what does this mean to you? This holiday, um, what does it represent?
Well, it represents more progress in moving in the right direction to acknowledge the contributions that the African Americans have made, to this country, to development, some of the financial foundations that it has. Um, it's acknowledgement, so that the struggle continues in terms of looking for true equality and what that means. You know, it hopefully what can eventually one day we will have like things like these hate crimes and injustices that are happening just with people just dying just because of the color of their skin. One day I would really hope that would end. uh it's like, so being it's interesting because this Juneteenth really does celebrate the slave's freedom, right? But we I wanted to also help us connect to like a heritage that we as African people have brought to this country, and to be able to recognize, again, like not only the financial foundation that this country has been built off of, but also the contributions that we made. Like for example, like my dad is an army vet, right? He was a veteran, and there's been many people of color that served their country, served it proudly, and to serve the country and then come back home and then be treated less than, those things kind of still hurt. But Juneteenth, having this celebration now, there's a federal holiday, but not everything kind of shuts down like on the other holidays. But it's an acknowledgement. It's a good step to continue to make progress, and I definitely think that conversation is. So I found this timely that we had we scheduled for the day. We didn't even know, I actually didn't even
Yeah.
know it would be
Yeah.
Juneteenth, but it just happened to be. But it's important to keep, again, just keep it having an open, honest dialogue um race, not to shame, but just to say, hey man, just to kind of the level playing ground. And sometimes, from our perspective, at least this is my opinion, right? I can't speak for the whole race on this one, but it's the people in power that need to uh, um, distribute the. So what I mean is, a lot of this is a white discussion, right? So like white people being able to speak up publicly, like again, and trying to help address, like, which they have, like people like Heather Heyer, who was she's the martyr. She was the person who was get killed in the Charlottesville a few years ago when they were having the rally. So there there's people that are help us with our cause, and again, this is to keep speaking up, and we can try to continue. And this Juneteenth holiday is an example of an acknowledgement, and hopefully we can just keep building off of this, not just make it just a holiday for a day off, but to have meaningful conversations and discussions that lead to real change and real diversity, and equitable distribution of resources, and real change that we continue to work towards, even though I know it probably won't happen in my lifetime or my kids' lifetime, but we can still continue to pursue true equity.
Amen, man. Yeah, and thank you for being here. It's a privilege to be able to have you, on this day and to talk about it because yeah, it is. I don't want to say it's a rare discussion, but it's a discussion that an individual like me has to go seek out, and build a more diverse community, build more connections, to hear these perspectives because you know that's the thing is like again getting back to what I said about the tendency of white people to not acknowledge race, that kind of keeps it in the box. We talk about the man box, and I think the like
Mm-hmm.
white racial comfort box is similar in that sense. Is that we have to kind of you peek our heads up and knock down the wall. um, but yeah, so thank you so much for sharing all of that, both on the mental health front when it comes to unpacking condition norms and the man box, and also kind of destigmatizing vulnerability, and also educating and having a discussion on race on this timely day too, and kind of some practical advice to way to ways to build connection. And also what I also heard is that to not be afraid of acknowledging biases. It's okay. Like none of us created this structure, none of us perpetuated or perpetuated the past. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
it's not there doesn't need to be a fear of acknowledging and dealing with that. And I think the way you approach it is very level headed and calm, and that's what we need because most people are quick to get defensive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's just all just conversations about true equality, right? Like we can't change the past, unfortunately, and all the people that have been lost their lives just for being black, we can't change the past. But when we have discussions, and sometimes they're not going to always be fuzzy and nice, right? But they can lead to real um, diversity and inclusion, and and I think that would have a positive impact on the overall mental health of the society, right? Where we can get to know our commonalities and be human with each other, right? Versus letting hate kind of take over and kind of direct. But I think overall it'll have a great benefit on the mental health of our society and culture. You know, giving guys outlets, giving women outlets, giving people outlets to be able to have create healthy support systems that are diverse, but they can be that can lead to real change, and that's really healthy. That can be really healthy, and mental health is important and vital, especially in these times right now, man. Just having that psychological, social, emotional well-being, something that I think we all should strive towards on a daily basis as we deal with life's ups and downs.
Well said. Well, Michael, it's been an absolute pleasure, man. We're gonna
Yeah,
pivot over
Thomas.
to the Spark by Seek Discomfort game.
Okay, all right.
um, cool. So we'll each get a question. We'll get a different question, and you have a choice. So you can go first or second.
Yeah, so I'll go first.
All right, I like it.
Yeah,
Courageous.
yeah, yeah. What do you think I fear the most in life? So am I
Yeah, I
expecting
guess
you?
I guess this one is a. I guess we could. How about we'll just each do this one question, so we'll answer about each other.
Okay, okay. Oh, so I'm gonna take a guess at what you. Okay. Let's see. I think. Let's see. What you fear most in life is. Oh my God. It's probably motorcycles. Motorcycles. You seem like you're not a motorcycle guy. You don't seem like you're a motorcycle guy.
I uh I like that's interesting you say that. I like scooters.
Yeah.
I'm more comfortable on like a scooter, like a Vespa. I'll cruise around. But yeah, I don't
Mm.
I don't really mess with motorcycles. I mean, I play rugby, so I've had enough like head injuries.
Uh, yeah. Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah. Rugby. Yeah. Rugby is something. That's a tough sport.
Okay. And then
Intense.
I would say for you, this is just guessing like from other therapists I've talked to, a fear I would guess you might have is like not being able to get through to someone or not being able to help someone. Um,
Hey, that's close. It's real close. Yeah. So yeah, it's close. Cause so I think my biggest fear is you know dying alone, right? And then nobody showing up at my funeral. I
mm,
think that's my biggest fear.
oh man,
So that
yeah,
what so me it kind of fuels me to help people. Like if I feel like I can help people and be
yeah,
impact, then I'm like, well, maybe they'll show up at my funeral.
yeah.
You
That's
know?
that's real, dude.
Yeah.
I'm you're gonna have a banging funeral. Don't worry. I'm sure,
I
man.
hope I'm working on it.
Dude, I'll be there if I'm on the East Coast, man. You're a ledge. Absolutely.
Hey,
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Oh, for sure. Thank you so much for the conversation. This is a yeah, it's a privilege to talk to you. Um, your book is out, and there's one behind you, so I wanted to
Yes.
ask you about that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, man. The name of the book is Tribe of Men: Understanding How to Evolve Your Masculinity, Find Your Community, and Reach Your Potential. It's available on Amazon. It's a short and powerful read, man. It's a personal development tool, right? If I wanted to write for, I know a lot of guys are on the fence about therapy. It's still, stigma is shrinking, but there's still a lot of guys that are on the fence. So this book is like a personal development tool that can help you manage stress, manage your emotions, and if you're dealing with trauma, if you want to heal through self examination, or there's some exercises in here that help you find your purpose and learn the art of self motivation and what that looks like for you. So it's a tool, man. It's a powerful guide. It's a short and powerful read to help guys and any reader actually, again, manage their emotions, manage stress, learn tools of for self-care, right? Because I think that self-care is massively underrated, especially with guys. They think that a lot of times that self-care is like a woman's thing, but no, self-care is I look at it as a set of activities, rituals, or practices that help refresh, recharge, or recenter you, right? So you can take on life and the ups and downs of life, right? And self care is just as important to the well being of men as it is to women.
Awesome. That sounds like a great gift for the men in my life. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, man. So it's on Amazon at this time. I'm also on Instagram and TikTok where I try to share wellness tips, for people, right? Try to use my social media for good. And on Instagram, I'm getting used to all the social media, right? So it's Mike King. So it's its_Mike King on Instagram and Twitter. No, excuse me, on Instagram and TikTok, and they can find some wellness tips. I also have a website where for my practice, like I said, I've been in private practice now for about a year, and the name of the
Nice.
website is Mindful
Congrats.
Actions LLC. Thank you, man.
Yeah, it's
Mindful Actions LLC.com, and they can find more information about how to contact me there. I also have a blog, so I blog about wellness and mental health, and you can get a link to the book there, or you can go directly to Amazon.com and look up Tribe of Men by Michael King.
that's awesome, man. Which states are you licensed in?
I'm licensed in Maryland and the District of Columbia.
Nice.
Hmm.
Awesome, man.
Yeah, yeah, man. So thank you very much for the opportunity for me to plug the book, and that it's out here. It's a tool, like again, a personal development tool, and it can help any reader. So it's not just for men, but it can help a reader that wants to focus on self care, mental wholeness, build solid relationships, and evolve their leadership as well.
Wonderful, man. Well, Michael, yeah, again, thank you so much for the time and for the great work you're doing. You are changing the world, I think, with your message and your work. So good
Thanks.
on you.
So, thanks.
It
So
was
maybe
a,
my funeral, it'll be hopefully it'll be some people there at my
it's gonna be
funeral.
a banger, dude. Come on.
Yeah, yeah, we'll have a party. They're gonna have a party, not me. They're gonna have
Yeah,
a party.
you'll be resting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'll be enjoying it from above, just watching down.
Yeah, but no, seriously, dude. From what I know of you from this conversation, rest easy on that one. There's gonna be a lot of people.
Man, thanks, man. Thanks.
For sure.
Thanks. It's definitely, man. I enjoy this time with you as well. And shout out to all your listeners. And, just wishing you wellness, productivity, and continued growth, man. Right. So, yeah, so you can keep doing what you're doing with your in line with your purpose and keep
Hmm.
making an impact on the community, a positive one.
Beautiful, man. Thank you.
Yes, sir. You're welcome, Doc. You're welcome.
Cheers, Mike. Have a
All
good
right.
one.
Cheers, sir. You too now.
Thank you.
Bye bye.